And now, another Hotch Potch feature film.
Um,
Well, how
Time
about
for
you?
another
You and
time for another
Marco?
reading? No, no, we're no, we're boring. I'm boring. Gail's not boring.
Very boring. Yeah, we're
But
going to
how?
hear from Harris and Kim next. He's
Yes.
going to read an excerpt from his story, The Toxic Ones.
All right. Yeah, thanks for allowing me the opportunity to read here. Appreciate it. This is a bit of an Old Testament kind of tale. So it involves well, I'll just read it. Tomorrow at dawn, the two elders plan an escape from the compound. It won't be easy. Behind the prison's ozone barricade lies a radioactive forest of dead trees, giving off 3 to 15 sieverts of cesium-131, which will kill all life within a day. A tunnel underneath, muses Eddie. That's the way out. Mel's cigarette smoke rises. His cough is much worse, Eddie thinks. We need to leave while we're still capable. Eddie walks towards the gigantic TV screens, the only high-tech items in the compound. They show videos of the outside society. Their purpose is to persuade inmates to reflect on the mistakes they made. Shots of smokestacks, polluted rivers, extinct animals, and discarded plastic intersects with scenes of green jungles and pristine waterfalls, images of the world that was. Eddie stares at the screen, then he observes the other residents lying on the cement floor, gazing up at the video, saturating themselves with the stories of their sins. Toxic materials come in daily on the train along with new prisoners. All the living and the dead debris that exists in the world is swept up and carried to this place. Across the compound, ancient folks with bloodshot eyes play with tiny balls of mercury, roll the shiny silvers from hand to hand. Others hammer asbestos shingles and breathe in the dust. They burn off their limited physical energies until they drop dead or become injured or disabled, then join the nodders who line up against the facility support beams, breathing in the tainted air. Behind the nodders, the mad ones push shopping carts full of makeup and polyester materials, piling up debris, then picking everything up and carting it away again. It's a never-ending round of hoarding and dumping. There's no recycling, only recircling, Eddie thinks. The words of his daughter, the judge, run through his head. After she pronounced his life sentence, Amika summoned him to her private chambers, made him stand at the end of a long table while she sat in a tall chair on the other side. I'm giving you this information because you are my father, she spoke. There is a tunnel. She paused. It's the only way out, if you acknowledge your guilt. Eddie tried to look into his daughter's tiny, piercing eyes, but she turned away and kept talking in a low monotone. The key to the tunnel door opens only to the consciously remorseful. Those truly sorry can reach out their hand and touch a light circle, which shimmers from a dawn sun ring, filtering through a gash in the ceiling of the dead reactor core. You'll know the place when you see it. As the light hits your outstretched hand and causes a shadow, the door under the floor tiles will open. The tunnel is behind that opening. Amika folded her arms and stared down at Eddie from her judge's chair. You have to feel remorse to escape through that tunnel, Father. It won't open otherwise. It sounds like magic, Eddie answered. I don't believe in magic. All right, there it is.
That's great. Thank you so much, Harrison. It's so fun to hear everybody read because you guys are all great readers, so it's such a treat. I'm familiar with the stories now, but to hear your expression is it's really fantastic. Um,
It's way better to hear them. That's so cool. Yeah, we really appreciate Harrison being here today, like everybody else. And next up is Felicia, who will read an excerpt from her story, New Day.
Oh, hi. Okay. The painter Diego Valencia de la Vega, once past the age of 40, no longer painted objects, but the spaces around them. He trained his lynx's eye on abstractions of mass, on shadows, on the marks left after removals, on spatial displacements, on inklings of color erasures. The voids hold far more meaning than the object, he said. They contain its imprints, its vanished anatomies, plus the forms it had considered and not taken, as it were. The void holds more versions of the work than does the work itself. So too does his studio, newly vacant except for what might have been after the crime scene tape was taken down, the last traces of blood cleansed from its walls, and the space made ready for its new occupant, for a new day, a new artist, for me. I say the studio was vacant, but is an empty space truly so? My predecessor left behind a few objects, props as he called them, random stuff picked up at flea markets or the sidewalk sales, ubiquitous in Brooklyn in those days, pop-up events attached to move-ins or evictions or that died unexpectedly, occurrences that marked for a few years, that section of East Williamsburg. You had to be on the lookout. The best events weren't advertised. Does disaster announce its intentions? I don't think so. I miss those days. Valencia de la Vega's former studio occupies the building's coveted ground floor. It's accessed from the street via a broad marble step where rain pools in shallow depressions, worn in by 2 centuries of comings and goings. Double glass doors let in the East River's oblique and changeable light. The street is quiet, leaf shaded, faced with frowning 5-story brownstones. It gives on to the inevitable dead end just short of the river. Maddeningly so, as the street offers views but no access to the river's walkway. The passage is shaped like an old-fashioned keyhole, wide at the far end of the block, where cars cram into every legal parking space, then narrowing into a chute on its approach to the turnaround. Cobblestones poke up through the asphalt, jostling babies awake in their prams, or occasioning a dog walker's stumble, quirks that make this road, for most, less traveled. A click of the key, a wrench on the doorknob, and one of the tall double doors swings open enough for me to slide in. No need to hit the push button light switch. Daylight filters into the studio. Dust motes swirl around props the junk pickers will claim if I don't sort through them first. An Art Deco fire screen splays in front of the limestone mantle on which rests a gilded clock, stopped the way De La Vega preferred. Time was of no consequence to him. It's styled in an over-the-top Rococo manner, more befitting Miss Havisham's fossilized drawing room than a hipster's 21st century digs. The fireplace andirons and pokers are missing, seized as evidence, no doubt. Above the mantle hangs a pair of enormous deer antlers that jut into the room like ritually raised arms. Stained plaster walls bear traces of vanished paintings. One picture remains, removed from its hook and propped at the far end of the mantle. God knows what prompted De La Vega to acquire the painting of the Pierrot, chalk-faced and yearning in loose blouse and ludicrous pantaloons. It may have been the clown's ability to express in the space beyond words the tragedy of the artist as a victim of misdirection. What is art but a grand sleight of hand, an illusion, am I right? No, multiple illusions. First, that the artist is able to capture the scene, whether perceived through the mind or the senses. Second, that the act of viewing won't change the creation, even as the creation changes its viewer. This painting does both. Look and a tear glints on Pierrot's painted cheek. Look again, and you'd swear it was a trick of the light, as the tragic face now holds the hint of a smile. A melancholy smile, to be sure, a Mona Lisa flicker that seems to react to the gaze. Then in the next moment, the smile twists into a bitter j'accuse. But no, that perhaps is my conscience. Such an effect would normally make me uneasy, As with those portraits whose eyes dog your steps like a subway pickpocket, you can't wait to give them the slip. Instead, the Pierrot draws me closer. I've discovered a kindred spirit, malleable, open-minded. The figure's brassy orange hair confesses to a certain sensibility, as say the version of Bowie as the thin white duke with the pack of chitanes stuck in his blouse. Blink and I glimpse the artist's muse, my Julie, cast as a yearning Edith Piaf, her thin penciled brows raised above wounded eyes, as she sings of a clown whose heart came unscrewed, while the drink-maddened crowd applauds the life he has missed. Blink again, and Pierrot is back as the tragic spurned clown. Bowie hair intact. Here's someone who can slide in and out of a persona as easy as changing a suit. My friend de la Vega must have seen the figure's chameleon emptiness. Pierrot as a human screen on which the artist might project his illusions or become one himself. The perfect foil, eh? I can't tell whether the comment played in my head or came out of the picture. I decide I imagined it and poke into the rest of the studio. De la Vega had been experimenting with a complex refracting sequence of glass dots of exactly opposite colors set into two towering, precisely pitched, pure white panels. When placed just so, the dots cancel each other out. You don't see either color, but a single oppositional energy field. His idea was to make the work disappear. The viewer merges with the space and becomes the object, leaving the object to contemplate the viewer. In the end, de la Vega himself became an object, struck down in the grip of his greatest illusion. I'm talking about love. What other illusion? The dopamine storm released inside of the objects of one's obsession, the hope that the object will find one unique, attractive. Something in Julie aroused de la Vega's desire to possess not the woman, but the space around her. Perhaps it was the light, a slant through her fiery hair, or the cleft as her arms snugged against the curve of her hip, or the notion that one of her breasts might fit exactly the porcelain demitasse the artist had picked up at a flea market. Julie, or rather her space, the idea of Julie, became his obsession. I suppose in that sense she was like the Pierrot, a human screen on which the artist projected his illusions. And thank you. And for the rest, you'll have to look into the issue. Thanks.
Thanks, Felicia. That was terrific. And that we talked about this issue being about setting and place, and I found that Felicia's story had such an interesting take on the idea of space and negative space and positive space. It was very, very interesting. So thank you.